Welcome to the Quality Conversation brought to you by Resume Wallet. This show is all about discussing what quality means in the talent acquisition ecosystem. I'm your host, Serge Boudreau, and today I am joined by Andrea, who is the Director of Talent and Brand at Mosaic Vet Partners. Andrea, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Serge. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. We're just talking in the green room before. I was sure I interviewed you on the Recruitment Flex, but I guess this is the first time we've ever recorded together, so it's my honor.
It is. Oh no, it's a pleasure, and it's too bad you've avoided me for this long, Serge.
Yeah, I know. But we're here now, and
We're here.
I'd love to jump in initially and kind of get a brief intro on your journey into talent acquisition. When did you start, and how did you get to the role that you're in now?
Yeah, no, happy to speak to that. I think like a lot of talent acquisition professionals, you just sort of fall into this space of HR and you develop a love in, one segment of HR. And for me, that was the happy space, which is talent acquisition, the fun side, as I call it, of HR. And spent a large majority, almost 10 years of my career at Parkland Fuel Corporation, now known as Parkland. Loved my time working in different areas of different business units in particular, serving as a talent acquisition professional. And was lucky enough to lead a fair-sized team in the last few years that I was there. I went on maternity leave, had my son, and when I came back, there had been, a lot of different changes at the organization, and I thought, this is a really good place to look at a different chapter of my personal growth.
Yeah.
And an opportunity came up at Mosaic Veterinary Partners. And I've always loved the build, like the wearing a number of different hats and dabbling in a million different things. And that was the stage of growth that Mosaic Veterinary Partners was at, where they really didn't have a strong focus on any type of HR functions or talent management, if you will. And it seemed like a really great fit. And I love animals. I've been an equestrian for a good chunk of my life and always had dogs. And so it's such a fun space to work in.
I always use the example when it comes to employment branding, and this came from James Ellis, is if you're promising to someone that you could cuddle with puppies all day and you show up to work and you can only cuddle with puppies half a day, your employment brand is kind of giving you a wrong message. But literally, you're the example of you can cuddle puppies a lot in your role. I think that's a massive perk.
Massive perk. Literally can cuddle puppies. Last time I was in Fairview, Alberta, at one of our amazing clinics up there, there were little newborn goats that came in a little box. I had a chance to cuddle with them. Mixed animal medicine is a term that I don't think a lot of people have heard of. I think I had actually asked my now leader, can you just help me understand what mixed animal medicine is? And it truly is a mix of all animals: cows, horses, small ruminants, including goats, cats, dogs, exotics, ferrets, you name it. And it's so neat to see our different clinics because they all have slightly different specializations. Like some will focus more on large animal or just equine. Some are just exclusively small animal.
Tell me a little bit more about Mosaic. What type of roles do you recruit? I'm going to make some assumptions like vet assistants, but give me the range of what type of roles that you recruit for.
Mm-hmm. You nailed it. Primarily technician assistants. We have veterinary office assistants, reception type of roles. We really are striving. A lot of focus is put on those DVMs, those doctor of veterinarian roles. Registered veterinary technologists is another really, really big focus. That's almost as challenging to recruit for as those doctors themselves. But I'm very lucky to have my colleague Juliet, who is in a true HR generalist function, to help with some of those more entry level and more junior, if you will, roles. And then between Juliet and I, we really dive in and spend a lot of time focusing on those RVT and DVM roles.
How hard are those roles in this current landscape? Are they easy to recruit? Do you get a lot of candidates? Are you sourcing all these? Like, what's your approach to recruit these roles?
Mm-hmm. Be curious to hear your perspective on this, because I know you had spent a bit of time helping a particular company you had mentioned earlier. But it's tough. And I was warned about it when I joined, because in my past life, as you know, we were dealing with drivers, class 1, class 3 drivers.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult landscape. Doctors, vets are a whole nother ball game. And the technologists too are tough. And it's tough because there's small class sizes coming out of these universities, and that's changing. A lot of them are growing to 80 or 100, but it's going to take us 4 years to see the fruits of that. And we don't, when you get a resume of a veterinarian, they may check all of the boxes, if you will, for the skill sets that you're looking for, the areas of specialization, but you're not just going to hire them based on that, because you want to make sure they're the right cultural fit.
So say you're posting a vet job. Do you get a lot of candidates that apply, or is it you have to go and source all of them?
It's 99% sourcing. We actually at one point tried to restructure the way we advertised because we weren't getting any qualified candidates, any actual DVMs applying for those veterinarian roles.
So who was applying? Were you getting candidates that just weren't qualified? Was that
for sure? Yeah,
Really?
Whether they're using AI to apply to these roles or whatever it may be. The landscaper in Ontario applying for a DVM role in Alberta, like just total mismatches. We see that all the time. It is interesting. But that's more of a rare thing for these veterinarian roles, thankfully.
What about the other roles? Are you sourcing, or are you getting them from job boards or your career site? How are you getting those candidates?
A word of mouth is a big thing, connections that individuals have. I think one of the things that really surprised me and still sort of surprises me about this space is that poaching is not really a thing.
Yeah.
And so, we have to be very, very mindful of the connections and relationships that exist, even more so in this space, because everybody seems to know everybody and, either went to school together or has done a podcast together. It's a really special space that way. If I were to meet an RVT somewhere and wanted to follow up with her, it would be a very sensitive thing to reach out to her at her current employer to ask her if she'd be open to a conversation, if I was the one initiating that. She initiated it or he initiated it, different story. But yeah, it's sensitive, and it's something I would always probably pick up the phone and call my fearless leader, Jonathan, who's our president and CEO, to say, is this fair game? Any sensitivities with us looking at this clinic? And sometimes he'd say, no, like, they're great. Leave them as is. We'd love to have their talent, but they have a rock star team and I don't really want to mess with that. So it's different in that sense.
As you mentioned, it's an extremely competitive space when it comes to talent. Obviously, there's some big players that are bigger than Mosaic. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you go into the marketplace and showcase that you're a great place to work and you should go there instead of other places?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was hoping you would ask me this question. This is the best part of my job, and it is such a special thing for me to be able to tell the story about Mosaic, because a few years ago, very, very few people had heard of Mosaic. And there's this stigma with corporates, if you will. All of these big private equity companies are gobbling up these smaller veterinary practices. So the number of private clinics are becoming fewer and fewer. And so you'll see these private equity companies or larger companies acquire, and then it's a one-size-fits-all model for all of the clinics. So there's very little room for flexibility or customization of building an offer package for you. There's very little flexibility in terms of how that compensation or total rewards package is structured. And I think from the feedback we've been given, very little feedback around how we can build a career for you as you still have a life.
Yeah.
And so the story that I'm really proud to share, and I'll actually back up by saying that we call ourselves the uncorporate, which is not a word, but we're the uncorporate in this world, in the sense that nothing that we do is cookie cutter, and there is not a one size fits all model for any of our practices. And so as we grow and work with our practices, we sit down with them and say, how much do you want us to be involved, or how little do you want us to be involved? And we're here for you if you need us. Reach out. And then when it comes to candidates, being able to tell them that they can preserve the things that are important to them in their life, like spending 2 weeks out east with family and taking that extra time, or needing a flexible schedule because they have a young family, or they're competitive equestrian that needs more time off on Fridays or Mondays. those are the conversations we like to have and we want to be having with our talent. Because as you know better than anybody, you can tell them you're offering everything in the world, but what actually matters is them being happy at the workplace. And so we want to structure something for them in a way that, works and fits into their life.
I love it. I'm curious. So obviously you have tools that you leverage. Like what does your tech stack look like? What ATS are you using when it comes to recruitment marketing? Is there particular vendors that you're leveraging a lot? Like just curious of how you're functioning internally.
Yeah. And, maybe we should be doing more, honestly, Serge, in the way of our tech stack, if you will. From an ATS standpoint, we use Pinpoint,
Okay.
which very few people have heard of. And we spent a lot of time a couple of years ago assessing a few different models that we thought would work well for us. And Pinpoint, we're still so happy with. It's a very intuitive system that allows you to navigate through all of your candidate profiles and disposition appropriately, like all of the basics. It just does it very, very well.
Mm.
Plus, it's in an attractive looking tool. It's really, really nice. And one thing I talk to, my colleague about all the time is less of the fancy tools and more just being real with your candidates and having old school conversations versus relying so heavily on technology. Maybe I'm old school, like I still write in my lined notebook here when all of my peers are taking notes on Teams. But I just think that is the biggest tool that every company and talent professional should be using. And I know it's hard because time, right? It takes time to have those meaningful conversations, but that is the biggest thing that I try to leverage.
Well, I think human touch is definitely a differentiator in the marketplace right now in a world of so many different tools and AI becoming such a big piece of the talent acquisition ecosystem. So I think you're doing it right in that sense, but it's a perfect segue. I do want to talk about AI in this space and what you're seeing because feedback from many talent acquisition practitioners are telling me like, we're getting bombarded by candidates and they're either AI assisted, which means ChatGPT is helping them with their resume, which
Mm-hmm.
generally a lot of people don't mind, right? Like when you talk to talent acquisition folks, but then you are getting applicants to your earlier example of like, you're a diesel mechanic in Ontario. Why are you applying for a vet job or a vet assistant job in Calgary? And I think a lot of it relates to some of the lazy apply tools, we like to call them, which basically you can click once and it's applying to hundreds or thousands of jobs. But what are you seeing? Are you seeing those situations? You mentioned one earlier, but is this widespread for you? Do you see AI becoming more and more a challenge as we move forward?
Well, it's a great question. I think our space is different in that it's such a specialized
Yeah.
market with the positions where you need to have a certification or a degree. It's different in that sense. But I will say that right now, for example, we've posted for a part-time admin slash marketing assistant. And we posted for 48 hours. And in 48 hours, I think we had 130 candidates. And it was interesting because you look at all these resumes and they look great and they're very professional. But if you use ChatGPT enough, you can get sort of a general sense of this is like too good to be true.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
certain words that ChatGPT generates frequently, you can sort of pick up on that.
Do you
But
care
that
if you see a resume, you're like, oh, ChatGPT help with this? Do you care?
It's a good question. Do I care? I try to look it, at the application holistically to see. So there was one that came in, and the particular application it seemed too structured, and then there was a one liner in there that had a typo in it, and
Yeah. Okay.
I want people to take the time so that I can see glimmers of their personality shine. And
Mm,
so one of the steps we take, part of it is sifting through those the mass applications and trying to differentiate them.
yeah.
So we follow up with a separate few little questions. And arguably we could have this built into our ATS, but we follow up separately. It's just a nice touch. We'd love to get to know you a bit better. Would you be kind enough to answer these few more questions before we move you to an interview with our team? And you can see the ones again that are cookie cutter or
Yeah.
copy and pasted. And there was one that stood out, and it was just genuinely someone's fun, quirky personality. And one of the things she typed as one of her answers was, "You had me at the horse on your website." And it was just, like ChatGPT is not coming up with that answer. It was just a
Yeah.
genuine, cute and quirky response. And that separated that person for me because it was just a bit of a spotlight into that personality.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm really curious if people are reading the job descriptions anymore. And I actually had a survey on LinkedIn asking, do you read the job description before you apply? And the answers were mixed. It was higher than I thought. Like 70% of the folks said they're looking at the job description fully. I don't think that's real. I'm still very skeptical on it because what I think is happening is people are applying to multiple jobs because it's so easy. Like easy apply on LinkedIn and Indeed, on all the sites, you can literally apply to a lot of jobs. If they get a call back, that is the time they actually go in deeper and research the job, look at the career page. Do you agree with that, or do you think most people are still reading the full job description before they apply for a job?
No, I'm with you. There's got to be majority that just, quickly upload their resume, easy apply, easy apply. And then I do exactly as you've said, that once they get a call back or move to a next step, then they actually focus and try to understand what it is that they've actually applied for, which honestly is a huge opportunity for those people who do really look into the job that they're applying, because it shows. Like you can,
Yeah.
once you dive in and take the time to review resumes, or a cover letter if people still have them, it makes that person stand out, at least momentarily. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth the effort.
So you mentioned earlier that you'll ask the screening questions kind of after the fact, after they've applied, right? Like especially when you get a large volume of them. Are you getting a lot of responses when you go back and be like, "Hey, can you answer these couple of questions additionally?" Are people ghosting you, or are they mostly answering the questions?
Honestly, almost all of I can't think
Really?
of one that where we've been ghosted. And we don't do it for all of our positions. The one thing I didn't mention, Serge, was the small quote unquote corporate roles that we
Yeah.
have. So I'm part of our support team. So for any of our support team roles, whether it be accounting or assistant or HR, those type of functions, we would probably go that step further. And I've been really impressed. And I know it's a big ask because we're hogging more of a candidate's time, and that's never ideal, but it really helps us make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm really shocked that you're getting that many responses because it's
Yeah.
not the feedback that I'm getting. So your brand must be doing something really well. I'm curious, looking at Mosaic, I'm sure you've done some creative things to be able to recruit the folks that you need. Any example that you have out there, like something different, something that's really focused on driving recruitment for Mosaic?
Mhm. I think the biggest thing, and we have a lot of work to do still. We're small and we're that in that awkward teenager phase, so we're still growing. The biggest thing that goes such a long way is those networking events and mingling
Mm,
with students, telling them the story, understanding what their interests are, and just having genuine conversations with these passionate students. I love spending time with them. Just I'm energized every time I walk
yeah,
away from the campuses or conferences, wherever we may be. That's one of the biggest tools, and it's not a confidential one. Like we just
yeah.
start early. We try to have conversations and engage with those students early so that as they progress through second, third, fourth year into their veterinary rotations to get real life experience, that we're top of mind because we've had a relationship. So that
Mm,
trust and the trust that comes from that relationship is huge, huge for us. The other thing I really want to focus on this coming year is more employer branding
okay.
and just that spotlight into what it's like to work at our practices. Right now, we're again just at the stage of our growth where we don't even have that many real life photos of our teams or any just little snapshots showcasing our amazing teams. And I know I'm biased, but our teams are just incredible. Like the fun they have and the tenacity they have is just it's impressive. And I always want to shine a spotlight on them. They probably will hate that. But I want to make sure that the world knows that the culture that we have and the teams that we have are genuinely very, very special. the world in vet med right now is a very taxing one. It can have a bad rap because the stress and the hours involved. It's an investment. It's a big commitment. And people don't sign up to be veterinarians for the money. They do it because they genuinely have a love for animals. We want to showcase these incredible individuals who are so selfless and give it their all and have some fun along the way. We're hoping that if we can showcase some of those materials, that it's more impactful and more meaningful than any type of stock photo or staged video you can have on your website or on any social media platforms.
Amen, sister. It works a lot better if you're authentic, you're real, both the good and the bad, right? Like, I think a lot of candidates are kind of like deluded by a lot of employment brand messaging. It all seems the same, right? Everything is great. And then they show up to work. It's like, yeah, that's not what the career site says. That's not the type of culture, because it becomes really clear. Even on your onboarding, when you're onboarding a new employee, they know within days if you're like, okay, that was a lot of BS that I was told throughout the recruitment process,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
I'm curious because like you invest a lot of time with people. You're very focused on the human side of recruitment. I feel onboarding is absolutely critical when it comes to recruitment or anything when it comes to the HR space, because if people have a bad experience when they come on board, it's like their retention goes down. There's so many factors that affects that future employees' success. What's your thoughts on onboarding and how important and how do you approach it?
I think that onboarding is arguably more important than any part of the recruitment process.
Yeah, I agree.
It,
I
it's
agree.
it's such a critical part, right? I mean, you can get all of the recruitment part right. You can tell the story to get somebody in the door, but as you've suggested with, James Ellis and the puppies, like if you're not petting the cute puppies 100% of the time and that's what you've been promised,
Yeah.
you're falling short right out of the gate. So it's so important. And one of my objectives actually for this coming year is one that I'm so excited about, and it is onboarding. Because I'm primarily the one chatting with our veterinarians and oftentimes chatting with our RVTs who will be starting, I want to make sure that within a week, within 30 days, within 60 days, within 90 days, I'm having those touch points because I have built the trust with them throughout the process. And hopefully they'll give me the honest scoop about how things are actually going. And so feedback for us at Mosaic is so huge. We know we have a lot of opportunity to grow and do better. And that's actually how I've recently framed it up with a couple of our new grads who have started when I was on maternity leave. And I came back and I said, hey, thrilled to be back. Welcome to the team. Tell me about your onboarding experience. We're at the stage of our growth where it could have felt a bit clunky, or maybe I heard that you joined during inventory week, and I'm so sorry that just wasn't the optimal experience for you. How could we have structured this differently for you so that your first week felt like, oh, this is home for me? So again, the conversation and the feedback is something that we want in order to have the best possible onboarding experience. And for us, it feels easy because we have such an incredible team of clinic managers that help us on site to support this process. So anyways, that's my long-winded way of saying it's so critical. It's so important.
We're on the same page. I think it is probably the most critical, and it's where we fail so many times in talent acquisition and HR. So love your approach with it. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years about quality of hire. And obviously, this whole show is about quality in the talent acquisition ecosystem. So I'd love to get your take of, do you measure any type of quality of hire? How do you know that you've recruited the right people and they've stayed or they've brought value to the organization? Do you look back a year after? How do you approach quality of hire?
I thought a lot about this when you had originally chatted with me about it. And I'd love to get to a stage where we're actually measuring quality. The biggest indicator of a quality hire is chatting with them 6 months into the role or a year. And I just had a meeting last week and I specifically had chatted with one of our new grads looking for critical feedback, constructive criticism. How can we be doing better? And she's like, I'm so sorry that I'm useless, but I love my job. Like there's nothing I can tell you. And that is a quality hire. That is someone who that has values that align with ours and that has a growth mindset. And I would
Yeah.
say that those two things are critical for us. The values and having that growth mindset where you have the recognition that there's room to do better and improve and flex to the different perspectives around you. So I think those are the big ones.
Obviously, your partners and your hiring managers you work with, how do they look at quality? Like, do they look back 6 months after being like, should not have hired that person because of this red flag that I saw, but I ignored it? Is that something they think of at all?
I think that's honestly an opportunity for us.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's always happening today. And I think sometimes it's probably just that our teams that have been part of the hiring process go, oh, I should have listened to that gut feeling. We really needed the support and we went with them hoping they would work out and mesh with the team,
Yeah.
and it's just not working out. So I think it's that gut feeling that sometimes we all feel strongly about, and you just hope for the best, which is so easy to do, unfortunately, in this space when you so desperately need talent.
Yes. And I see that, right? Like, I think I see it across all industries, especially when it's extremely hard to recruit. You have a demand that's really urgent. And you're like, let's see if it works out or not. And I think the majority of the time it doesn't, but it's still hard. It's really hard for talent acquisition and hiring managers to define that completely. But Andrea, are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Yes, except these are the ones I didn't prepare for, so brace yourself.
All right. Perfect. They're pretty easy.
All right.
So, what is a book that has changed your perspective on business or HR?
Irresistible, a book by Josh Bersin.
Ooh, Josh Bersin. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, really interesting, actually. Yeah.
I have not read that book, although I do follow Josh Bersin quite a bit. Perfect.
Yeah, it's top of mind.
Do you have a favorite podcast or series? It doesn't need to be about business or HR.
Mm-hmm. I think honestly, some of the podcasts I've followed are mom related.
Are they? Well, obviously.
That's just been the focus of my life in the last few years. And I'm drawing a blank on the one in particular that Wilder Beginnings is the name of the podcast. So anyone out there that has an interest in the crazy life with kids with a lot of humor in there, it's a good one.
I love it. That's good. Everything we've talked about, our audience is mostly talent acquisition leaders, practitioners. Is there anything you want to leave them with as far as what's a best practice or something they should always look for in talent acquisition?
Great question. The one thing I think about all the time through so many different steps of our talent acquisition processes is slowing down to speed up. So slow down with your candidates, get to know them, slow down with your processes in a stage of growth to make sure you're getting it right.
I do love that. That's why I wanted you to come on the show. I think you shared a lot of knowledge that the audience will enjoy and actually use in practice. So thank you for that. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is a great, easy option without a doubt. I'm the one looking after our Mosaic Veterinary Partners social accounts. So any connect through there would be easy, and I'd be happy to chat.
So Andrea Matrangolo, did I say it right?
Very close. Matrangolo. It's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. So you can find her on LinkedIn. You should connect with Andrea because she shares a lot of knowledge. And Mosaic Vet Partners, check out their website because they have some interesting content as well. And if you like horses, it's right on the front page.
You got it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Andrea.
Thanks, Serge. Thanks for having me.